So I've learned a lot about sales in the last 6 months. And what I want to share with you guys today is, not like a new script. It's going to be really a series of stuff, and we can probably put them into 2 different buckets. The first bucket's going to be pre-call, stuff you do before you have a phone call. There's nothing to do with while you're on the call. The second bucket's going to be different ways to approach the call when you're on it. So if you want to put things kind of into 2 different buckets, disclosure, I am planning on refining this into like a formal training, but unless I pulled all-nighters for the last week, it wasn't going to happen. So what I'm going to do is just try to get you guys the newest observations I've seen. Some of these things will be more powerful refinements of what you already have in principle form. I think the script is excellent that we have. However, there are times when things go off script. I want to talk about that a lot. And I also want to talk about the mindset, the posture, and everything that we want to have on these calls so that we enroll people, but we don't enroll them at the least energy level possible. And so what I mean by that is like there's 2 different ways. A lot of us think of a sale as a credit card and someone enrolling. And you can still do that and then get buyer's remorse. Or you can get resistance after the sale, or someone that gives you a credit card reluctantly and then is immediately watching everything you're doing, looking for a reason to immediately pull the plug. So a lot of the things that I am also going to share today are going to be about how to set up a really awesome client working arrangement with you so that it's not just that they bought into it, but they're sold on you, your process, and letting you do your thing so that they're not constantly trying to follow you around and micromanage you. It's like a pharmacist versus the psychiatrist. Like you can come in and they get something and they can hire a technician, right? We hire technicians when we know my air conditioner's broken, I need it fixed, come over there and deal with it. It's like that's a technician. We want to be more in that psychiatrist role where they say, you do your thing, I trust you to do that because you're an expert. And so we're going to talk about that as well. So first thing, we're going to cover some pre-sale call stuff. I already touched on this earlier, but the very nature of the fact that they're on a phone call with you means something is wrong. You don't get on phone calls with people you've never met unless there's a problem. Or you're not successful, and part of it is because you get on phone calls with people all the time. Okay, so if there is a qualified prospect, they're not like a guy that just started up their business and they're like going on every free webinar they can find. They're qualified in any way for your services. They're on the phone because there's a problem. Something is either seriously wrong or something they have is not performing to the level they expected. They might have a marketing company right now that's doing Google AdWords for them or doing lead generation, but it's only getting them 5 calls a month. And they're like, I should be getting more than 5 calls. And they're talking to this guy, maybe this guy actually knows what he's doing. So those are some of the different types of avatars. So when you get on the call, if it's like, oh, I just wanted to see what you've got, that still means they have a problem because they only want to see what you have because what they have is not satisfactory in some way. Now occasionally you'll find a very, very like rare obsessive person where it's like, hey, the thing is working really, really well already, but they're like, oh, I want it to be better and better. That guy's pretty rare. I don't really come across those people much at all where everything is going great. There usually is some sort of problem there. Occasionally the problem might not be related to something you can solve. So maybe it's like there's a quality problem. Like they're just not offering a quality service. And that's the smoking gun for why all the other stuff is not working for them. They're not keeping clients. So people are always willing to invest when they see value, okay? Anytime you get off the phone, provided the prospect is qualified, if they don't invest with you and your thing costs less than 50 grand, it's because the opportunity wasn't great enough or there wasn't enough urgency or in some way we didn't communicate the value or the desperation of their situation. We didn't help them see that on some level. Because the ability to come up with 50 grand from a business, heck, I've had people take out loans, extra lines of credit to market their business because they see the value in that. They see how they can invest money and get money back. So we're all basically in some ways selling business growth. So if you really can deliver that outcome and it's greater than the investment, it's a matter of getting the money. It's not a matter of, oh, I can't afford it, or oh, that's too much money. All they're saying is the value doesn't coincide with what we've offered in some way. One of the other beliefs I like to have is just that I always attract the perfect prospect. That's just something to put out there even in your daily affirmations is, I'm always attracting the perfect clients, the ones that will stay with me forever, the ones that will want to buy all my other services, the ones that will just be like, Philip, you are the best business decision I've made in the last 10 years. And anybody who will listen, I will sing your praises. One of the things as well is, and this is what we talked on with the kind of the affirmations and things like that, is you have to sell yourself first before you can sell anybody else. If you can't convince yourself that you can solve those problems and that that your ability to solve those problems is what's ultimately valuable, then they will never invest in you. It's a prerequisite. So if you doubt in some level what you're doing, you got to work on that with the affirmations and stuff. So one of the pre-call tools that you guys can use is that manifesto thing I had at the very end of that post. So work on that for all you guys, because that is basically, what is your reason for doing this? What are you trying to accomplish? Why are you trying to accomplish that? And even if you can read the longer version, at least like once a day, the manifesto, the hell your prospects are in and the heaven they're going to be in when your solution's in place. That's all critical for you to come in believing you can help the right person who's willing to be helped. And I'd say probably the worst thing you can do is just show up to the call and just be like, okay, it's a sales call, I'm going to read a script. It's like the script it's like a reflection. It's the tip of the iceberg of everything else you're working on. So the mindset piece is so important. Don't skip it. All right. So there's kind of 4 types of quadrants that you can show up as. And there's extremes of the two. There's one hand, there's the leader, and there's the follower. Okay, so you can be in the lead, or you can be the person asking questions, or you can be the person getting asked questions. The person that asks the questions controls the conversation. But on that point, the person asking questions can do it in a caring way or a tyrannical way. So a tyrannical way is like the whole, alpha dog, I'm going to come in and you're going to answer my questions, and it's an interrogation. And when you're first starting out, you can kind of be riding the line between the tyrannical follower who's trying to take the lead. And it's important to show up as that caring person that's going to lead them through a process. And by caring, we mean we're empathetic to their situation. We're understanding of their situation. We're there to help, but only if someone's willing to be helped. And so that's the quadrant you want to channel is really that person that's the nice guy, but you're in charge. Like unequivocally, you have boundaries. And we're going to talk about what some of those are. So, boundaries can be as simple as, look, if you go into a nice restaurant, they have a dress code. The dress code is not judgmental. It's just the dress code. Doesn't care who you are, doesn't care, it doesn't make exceptions. It's just a boundary. It's like, hey, if you come to this specific place, you got to wear this outfit. That's the boundaries. And we want to treat the boundaries of us being the one that leads the conversation as no different. There's nothing wrong with us leading that conversation. And if they try to get off, well, what do you do? We do a lot of different things. Let's find out what your challenges are and see if it's a fit. See, it's not about them trying to take that thing. You just remind them, hey, these are the boundaries of how we'll do the call, and then they'll either fall into line or they won't. And you do it in a way that's not controlling, like, no, you're going to answer my questions, how this call is going to go, versus, hey, so on these calls we go through, we try to get an understanding of your business, how everything works together, and we'll see if and how it makes sense for us to work together. And that's it. So that's kind of the attitude you want to have and the lens for everything else that we go through. So one of the other principles, I think, and now we're kind of starting to get a little bit more into the call for how you can show up on the call, is we want to take every data point. When you ask questions and when you collect data points and the answers to those questions, it should be done literally like taking a tray and sorting marbles. There should be no judgment about the color, the size, where it goes. Everything from what their practice areas are, to what their revenue is, to what their goals are. So like for you, Mike, when you ask the question, so what's your current billable rate? And if they're like $100 an hour, like, huh. Like it's like, if it's a judgmental, $100 an hour, it's like, it's just a matter of fact. $1,000 an hour, it's the same reaction. And then it's into, and how many hours a week do you currently spend working on growing your practice? They're like 10. Okay. So it's a collection of the data, not a judgment on it. And what you want to watch out for is if you're trying to get them to see that they're doing something wrong, that's the wrong way to do it. The right way to do it is to ask a question where you simply collect the data points that their conclusion is that's probably not the best way to do it. Yeah. But if it's done with a sense of really any hint of a judgment about them doing it that way, then that creates just that subtle, oh, this guy's trying to show me up type of an energy. So the nature of these questions is very early on, if you've ever been on a call with a prospect where they started to kind of close up and not answer questions. A lot of times if you go back and listen to that recording, you can kind of hear there was almost like an expected answer to a question that you asked or a certain reaction to their answer in some way that was not neutral. So neutrality, when you're going through these questions, is so critical. It's just the data. And the reason you want to do it this way is not only does it prevent them from feeling like they're getting judged based on how they answer, it also lets them know that there are no wrong answers to their questions, which makes them more likely to provide you with answers and be honest about it, because they're not thinking that you're expecting a certain answer. Because people, if I ask you a question, you can tell I'm expecting a certain answer. It's like, Michael, how many hours do you work out a day? It's like if there's an expectation based on the question, it creates this sense of you're more likely to lie and be untruthful with whatever it is that I was asking. So the more neutral you can be, you're just going to get more honest answers and more answers, period, to questions, because they feel like, okay, he's just collecting information here. It's not about him trying to ask me a series of questions and say, gotcha, you're an idiot for doing that, or you're stupid for doing that, or you shouldn't be doing it this way. And so that subtle energy and that posture with how you ask the questions is so critical to make sure that they don't feel like you're trying to get something out of the answers or they have to answer certain ways. So like even if you come and you're friendly, it's like if they get like, and so like, Bref, not to call you up, but like sometimes I listen to your calls and it's like you come across as like nice, and it's like there's that nice energy because it's like, I want to get a sale type of an energy. And maybe that's not what you're thinking, but that energy versus just this calm, cool, in control, just collecting information. Yeah, I just want to get some information about what you're doing, see if and how this would make sense. And you're going through and you're just collecting that data and you're assessing the situation. You're repeating it back to them.
That's exactly what a doctor does when you go.
Yeah.
Just think about when a doctor interviews you.
100%.
Trying to sell you.
And from there, all you're really doing is you're just trying to replay back to them what they're saying. Okay, so right now you're here and you want to get to here. Okay, cool. And you want to really just understand the depth of the challenges that they're facing, what the situation is, and why it's challenging for them. And we'll get into other ways to dig into those questions.
Can you say that last part?
You're trying to understand the depth of the challenges and just get more information about why that's a challenge. But again, it's really just a matter of fact we're trying to repeat back. Okay, so you just said that this is what you're trying to do and this is where you're currently at. Did I get that right? Okay, great. And if you can say that without any judgment, whether it's someone that's a perfect prospect or not a perfect prospect, then it's just a matter of fact we're going through and trying to understand. Now, two alternative ways that people can show up on phone calls, and I can certainly put some of you guys into this from the calls I've heard, is first of all, the demonstrator. So the demonstrator is someone that you show up on the call and you want to really perform, right? So you've got your data, your statistics, you're a smooth talker, you're solving the problem on the spot, you're always just trying to be like, oh, this is perfect. You're trying to like sell based on who you are, not based on their situation, right? And so one of the temptations we can fall into is once we've gotten some success and some data, is to then change the way we do our sales calls to put that data and information into the call. I've been getting all these guys great results, and we're doing this, and we're doing all this awesome stuff and everything like that. And they're like, okay, okay. But it's like we haven't taken the time to understand their situation before we start tooting our own horn about what we can do or how we've done it or why we're the expert at this or that. And so the demonstrator is kind of an avatar you want to avoid because A, it's not effective, and B, it's very much like a traditional sales role where we're trying to sell them more on our demonstration of our abilities on a call as opposed to an understanding of their situation and their options and whether or not we make sense to help them overcome that. But it's about an understanding as opposed to a demonstration. Alternatively, another persona that some of you guys can show up at is a connector. And the connector is like the friendly, chatty, likable person. Like you're almost trying to befriend them on the call, right? And it's like they do business with you. Okay, yeah, he seems like a nice guy. That's good, he's got some personality. You know, like you know their sports teams. You can create the pleasant conversations. You can go through and just create rapport with them. And you just try to avoid the pain and the challenge at hand because you're like, hey, I wouldn't have this conversation with my friend, right? Because if you're hanging out with your friends, you tend to avoid uncomfortable conversations. Like if you know the topic of politics will be divisive, you tend to avoid it. If you know religion will be divisive, you tend to avoid it because you want to keep your friend. But ultimately, on some level, sales call is about some discomfort that they're having. And the more friendly we are, the less likely we are to do that. And there's a lot of trainings out there that teach you to develop all this rapport in the beginning, and then immediately after that start digging into all these like painful questions, and then people are like, oh, it's so weird, like this guy became my friend, and then he started asking me all this really uncomfortable stuff, and then he was like, you got to buy right now or your life's going to end. And it's like that whole thing, it doesn't vibe correctly because it's like there's no way you can create intimacy and a friendship in a single phone conversation. Just can't. You can kind of like someone a little bit, but you can't create a rapport and a deep connection, everything like that through a phone call. You can help them see that what they've been doing isn't working and will continue to not work if they keep doing it. So we want to avoid those two types of personas, the demonstrator, where we demonstrate our abilities, and the connector, where we're just trying to connect our way to a client. Really, the best way to describe it is you want to show up as the most informed, the most skilled, and the most researched person in your area of practice. And what you want to do then is deliver on your ability to be an expert, not on your ability to just do a whole bunch of really hard work, where it's like, hey, how much work are you going to do for me?
So most informed, what else? Skilled research? Skilled and research.
Yep, the most informed, skilled, and researched person in your area of practice. The number one choice. And that person isn't going to be focused on being liked. They're not going to be focused on trying to demonstrate their abilities because they know they have them. Now, the other thing that's critical is always understanding that your thing is a means to an end, not the end. So just like in everything, nobody is here because they wanted to come to a mastermind. There's an outcome you're looking for outside of that. So like a guy, a great example of this would be, let's say someone has a son in school and he's getting bullied, and he'd prefer him to go to a private school. Well, the way he can do that is by earning more money to afford a private school. So he wants to increase his income so that he can get his son into a private school so he can stop being bullied, and so that he can also go maybe on more vacations. So it's always important not to confuse our service as what they're buying. It's always that means to an end. And if we don't uncover that, then we always will have a surface level working arrangement with the client and never dig into the real reasons why they're doing something. And then be completely blind to it when they then change their priorities down the road because we didn't understand the root challenges they were facing. So you create longevity with the client by understanding the root motivations and the root causes of their current situation. Not by trying to sell them from a technician standpoint or from a pharmacist standpoint a cure of the day, because then they'll move on to the next cure of the day. They really want is the reason why they're getting a headache to go away. They got a headache because their kid's getting bullied. They don't read an aspirin. So on that note is the judgment. So like equally to getting those answers is this should be as matter of fact as everything else. There should be no judgment of what it is that they're really buying. Maybe it's to beat a competitor. Maybe it's keeping up with the Johnsons. Maybe it's to send their kids to private school. There could be any number of different reasons why someone wants that. And the more we can focus on that desire to have that new thing, and the less we focus on the specific thing that they're buying of the day, whatever the service happens to be, the more likely they are to stay with you longer term because they understand that you understand their desires behind it, not just the technical aspect of it. So that's a very critical component, is really getting into that. And we'll talk about some better ways to do that here. And so when you guys review some of your past sales calls, I want you to, when you look for them, ask yourself, was there a reason for them to move forward now? And did we connect to the urgency of the vision that they represented based on their desire that they communicated to you? If those threads are not in place, then the sales call doesn't make sense. So we want to
repeat that.
If you review your past sales calls, you want to make sure that there was a reason for them to move forward now and that we ultimately connected them with their vision as it related to the desire. Ultimately, did we really identify what they wanted and all the different variables as it related to it, from time, money, and all that type of stuff? Ultimately, you're helping them enroll to making a decision to make their life better. That's it. They're all just trying to have a better life in some way, shape, or form. A good way to think of these sales calls is it's really like a dance, between two different people that you're talking with. And you're really trying to assess on both sides if the components form together. And if it is a true fit between what you offer, the outcome they want, and your ability to help them get there, then it's a binary decision and an easy one on their part and a simple yes. And if you look back to the sales calls that were a quick yes, you can almost always see that it was just everything was aligned, both in the timing and the outcome and your ability to deliver that outcome. And that created a rapid sales conversation that delivered. One of the other things that I've really seen is a huge hunger exists on these calls from the prospect in getting information. Because their number one thing that they want is, what's your offer? And how much does it cost? That is by far the most insanely motivating factor they have, is to go around, collect offers and the prices on them, and then take it back as something to consider at a later date. And so for you, if you're showing up as someone that is not giving them that information, unless you determine if and how it could help them, it creates this pull effect where now they're treating you differently. A salesman traditionally looks and says, what can I sell him? If I have two different things, which of these is easier to sell him, and how do I make him buy it regardless of whether or not it's helpful? It's just a matter of trying to get that in place. Whereas you're saying, if this isn't a fit for you, I don't really have anything for sale, which is true. And as a services business, you don't want to sell anything if it's not a fit, because then a month later, you'll be canceling. So you want to discover if and how it's a fit. And the more information they want and their greater hunger for that information, I've found the more you give them, the more they want. It seems to just be a never-ending receptacle for more stuff. They want more information, more knowledge. So turning the conversation around back to your questions is the best way to deal with that. So
even after all the questions that you've asked them, when it's their turn to ask questions,
They can go into that, and I'm going to talk about making the offer a little bit later on and how to present that in a way that's as vague as possible, but then also in a way that calls out some of their questions. So if someone is asking you, how do you deliver this outcome? Or why do you use this or that? And you say, well, how does that relate to the ability to deliver the outcome that you're looking for? Which is a simple question. Because their evaluation on whether or not you use one thing or another when everything else has been answered, such as the urgency of the situation, the desire they have to get to the next point, and the clear fact that you've presented them with an opportunity to do that, their evaluation of your methods is only based on their understanding, which is inferior because if they understood it, they would have done it, and they wouldn't need your help. So that's as smart as someone going into an operating room and saying, how are you going to transplant my heart from, install a new heart? Well, we're going to transplant your heart. It's like, I went to school for it. This is what I do. I'm professional at this, but we're not going to do a heart transplant based on your evaluation of how I do a heart transplant. We're going to do it to the way that's going to keep you alive and deliver the outcome you want. And we'll do it as quickly as possible because I don't want you to be under anesthesia on the table for an extra 2 days because you wanted me to do some other thing you read online in a blog about this specific way of doing it. It's about me doing it as efficient as possible, not about you evaluating how I do it. Because if you knew what you wanted, you knew how to get what you wanted, you would have done it already, and we wouldn't be talking here about how to implement this for you.
When a conversation goes to that point, do they generally still close?
In the equations, I would say where they're a good fit, it tends to. But the problem is that the people that you've gone and let them do that type of thing, they've basically more or less shown themselves after the fact that they're a micromanager and they're hiring you to be a technician, not a psychiatrist.
So you can make the decision at that point.
You can make the decision at that point. Absolutely. But the ones that behave that way have now immediately identified themselves as someone that wants to be involved in managing your expertise. And then you make that decision of, do I want to work with someone who wants to manage the delivery of my expertise to them? Or do I want to reject this person or give them an opportunity to be put in their place as it relates to me delivering that? Because that simple shift right there with how you position it will determine whether or not they're emailing you every 3 days. Hey, Mike, I was looking at the email message you put out there, and I was wondering if you could change this. It's like, well, there must be a misunderstanding here. If you end the sales call with, we'll do it the way that's the most efficient and effective based on my expertise, not on your understanding of my expertise, then that person's going to leave you alone and be a lot easier to work with than someone that wants to come in and hire you as a technician and evaluate and micromanage your delivery of it. And so that's really where I've seen the difference in how you enroll someone, is that difference at the end. Now, especially for those of us that are still figuring out the service delivery component, it's a lot easier to do it when you don't have someone on your ass trying to second guess everything you do.
Would you ever just say that bluntly to them?
Say which part bluntly?
Where you're like, we're going to do things how I know how to do them, not what your understanding of what I know.
Yeah, I say, we're going to do it the most efficient, effective way that we have.
Where do you draw that line going back, from the demonstrator and connector, where you're trying to, because as you bring that up, I can totally go, yep, do that, yeah. Okay, so where do you draw that line from okay, I'm able to relate with this person and I want to show that I understand, but I don't want to overspeak as well, because I think I'm overspeaking.
You can
tell me something and I'll
sure.
talk too much, I think, on the sales call.
You can show your understanding by repeating back to them what they said.
Okay.
So just if I understand correctly, this is what you're currently trying to do, and you're having some difficulties because of this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then you just move on.
Yeah. Your empathy is not required, your understanding is. And your understanding is confirmed through simply mirroring back and potentially even rephrasing what they said to you in a way that's simpler. When you can define the problem back to them and mirror it back to them in a way that was simpler and more refined than what they said to you, which you'll get good at because you're going to do a lot of these calls, they'll say, that's exactly it. Okay, perfect. So then you move on to the next phase. So that's a way to still get the understanding, but then not be like, oh man, I totally understand how you feel.
Yeah.
Right?
If I were to evaluate my last call, I would say like I oversold in every area, right? It's like I got everything I wanted out of this person. Like I had them going right down the path, but I was probably saying too much along the way, which probably killed it at some point. Makes sense.
Yeah. So yeah, the connector, that's great if you're at a networking event, but even then, you could probably do better at a networking event not being the connector type. And the demonstrator is just too much like the average salesman. You're trying to demonstrate your abilities. And we'll get into this a little more, but at the end during the offer, there's no need to oversell what it is that you offer. You want to present the exact information they need to understand what's going to happen next logistically so you can go out and implement your expertise. And that's it. You don't need to walk them through step by step exactly every little thing along the way, because as we mentioned, that invites micromanaging, second guessing, or being like, well, maybe this guy doesn't really know what he's doing, or things along those nature. So if you can't get them on the call to basically be like, okay, I'm ready to work with you, and I trust your expertise to implement this system for me, then they're going to be a difficult client in some way, shape, or form. And from that point, you can make the decision if you want to work with that person. So I'd say the best way to show up is to really think of yourself as the diagnostician. Like you're not the demonstrator, you're not the connector. You're coming in trying to diagnose and understand it as matter of fact as possibly, and just really summarize if and how something makes sense. You guys have heard me say this before, a prescription without a diagnosis is malpractice. So one of the blurbs I have here is sometimes people will show up and they'll have like a poor attitude. And this is meant to, these two different things I'm going to go through is really how to look at what we're doing and changing the mindset of the prospect. So a lot of times you tell someone, did you really just call me up to tell me that your future was something that you're unprepared for and that your outcomes are completely arbitrary and that you have no control of it? Or, did you call me because you want a better future and you want to recapture some of that? And if that is what you want to do and you do want to recapture a better future, let's talk about if and how I could be the person that helps you do that, and then how we could work together on implementing that. That's the full spectrum of someone coming in where they're just like, oh, I've talked to all these marketing guys and no one can help me, or I got burned by this guy or that guy or whatever. A good way to look at what we do is really a guide to the top of a mountain. And, anybody, if you've ever been mountain climbing, you know that it's something that's very difficult. It's treacherous and you need to be prepared for it. So what we offer are two levels of service. On one level, it's okay, well, I can take you up to the top of the mountain and it's $100 and it'll take us about 2 days, right? Another option is we can take a helicopter to the top. That's $1,000. It takes us about 30 minutes. It's like, well, I don't want to spend $1,000. Okay, well, for $100 we can walk up the hill. Take us 2 days. Well, I don't want to pay $100. Then walk up on your own. That's it. It's like 3 options. So how that applies to what we're doing is like, look, here's what you want to do. Well, you can probably hire some guy and probably get lost in the woods, or you can hire a helicopter and get up there faster. Which would you like to do? And presenting those options. So, as I mentioned earlier, if someone is satisfied, they won't be talking to you on the phone. It's just that simple. It's just like if someone's in a relationship, talk about, human relationships, they're in a committed relationship with somebody, they're not going to be on Tinder. Okay?
Or they'll be on Ashley Madison.
Right.